Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to episode 154 of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, the show about the business of culture and how culture affects our business. And today we're going to talk about the innovative power of a multicultural mindset. Well, that's a mouthful, and we'll unpack it. We'll take it out of our mouths piece by piece, bite by bite. We have a guest today that can shed some light on what it means to work with new ideas, with a diversity of thought, and how having lived in different cultures informs how we do that kind of work in an innovative way. Stick around.
Hello, mate.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Sorry, I was a little bit rushed. I was a little bit late. My hair's not done properly. I don't know. I mean, I was a little bit.
That's what it is. I thought, okay. That's what it is. So welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Two Chaps, Many Cultures. And as every day, with every episode, we want to know from you where in the world you are. Let us know. Don't be a stranger. Give us the information that we want from you. Tell us where you are in the world. Where in the world are you today, Brett? Are you where you always are?
Yeah, strange enough, I'm still at home. Still at home. Beautiful sunny day up here in Chicago. Wonderful. Snow is on the ground, looking resplendently white on the ground, under the basking sunshine, and it's beautiful. Can't complain.
We're still at home. I'm wondering if we'll ever have a different answer.
Soon, hopefully.
All right. But we have somebody with us here today who is joining us from home too, right? But who's been around the block a few times. And when we discussed having him on, he brought in the word of innovation. And while I sometimes have a knee-jerk response, innovation, yeah, that means different things to different people. Yes, thanks, Eric. Thanks for reminding us that
that's not nice.
No,
that's not nice.
That's not right. It might be nice. So innovation means different things to different people, but I think even though the word has been beaten around the block and beaten like a dead horse once in a while, I think as we work in our respective fields, we want to bring in new ideas once in a while, depending on our industry. And our guest today comes from a line of work where doing the same things over and over again won't win him any trophies and won't win him any promotions. So by definition, he had to come up with new ideas, and how being in a more global context, how developing a multicultural mindset has changed that or positively affected that. Here today to discuss that is Michael Merk from his home office, but also from Grand Rapids, Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. This is correct. Thanks so much for having me. Hello, chaps. Hello, everybody out there. No, this is fun. I'm looking forward to that. It's a topic that's very dear and close to my heart.
How is it close to your heart? What made being a global professional important to you?
Well, I've left my home culture something like 30 years ago, and I've always learned something new. I love seeing new things. Some people describe it as an experience that is close to heaven and hell. You get to see new things, but you also make mistakes by leaving your home culture. And I loved getting to see new things, and it enriched my life on so many levels that I said, if you can handle the disappointments and focus on the new things that you're learning, then this should be fun. So that's why I love this part, because I've also learned to use it as a weapon in a good way.
Okay. Well, before we go into the weaponizing of multiculturalism, let's tell our audience what's the native culture that you left and where did you leave it to?
So, quick introduction for me. I'm 55 years old. I'm born in Freiburg, which is some people who know Germany, the Black Forest. There, the southwestern part of Germany. My wife's from Nuremberg, on the other side of south of Germany, and we have lived for 3 years in France, which is where our son Maximilian was born, who is now 15 years old. Yeah, and within these the last or the 30 years of my career, I've been really inspired by this importance that culture has in communications and the marketing roles that I had, the projects that I solved, being immersed in those cultures, and that has made a difference for me. At the moment, I'm working at DesignWorks, which is a human-centered design consultancy here in Grand Rapids, West Michigan. And what brought me to this place is an expert assignment in 2008 that was supposed to take 3 years. But this is now year 12, so let's say that. In the meantime, I'm doing something different. I'm working with DesignWorks, and so far we're around.
So your native culture being Southwestern German, and you left the first time you decided to live and work outside of your native culture was France, which was, for those of you who are not intimately familiar with European geography, from Freiburg to France, it's probably less than half an hour to cross the river and be in the other country, but it's the immediate neighbor. However, a different language, some might say significantly different culture, but you didn't live in the, what some would say, stereotypical part of France, like Paris or another big metropolis of France. You lived, well, in quite a big city, but in Strasbourg, which is, well, a traditionally bilingual area of Europe. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Absolutely. My big advantage living in the Alsace region, which has been Germany 3 times back and forth over the last 100 years, unfortunately, was that I could speak the local dialect. And Strasbourg, France still has a newspaper section in German. Actually, some people can even vote there still in German. And so that was a bit of an advantage with the older population. But I was working there for an American company, and my role was to help the French and international team to connect more with the people in Grand Rapids, in West Michigan. And we can debate how close West Michigan is to the United States as a culture, but that's a whole other, I think, podcast.
All right. So the U.S. company that brought you to the U.S. was also the company that you worked for in Strasbourg.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And when we know, I was, I think, the first German who crossed the River Rhine in that company. So technically, Germans and French folks in that area cross the bridge once a day or a lot of times. But at that time, it was a big move because I also moved on a local contract.
Mm-hmm. Again, for those of you not intimately familiar with that part of Europe, I think what makes Strasbourg or the Alsace-Lorraine region quite unique in a cultural context is that it's been bounced back and forth between France and Germany like a ping pong ball, and it's bilingual. And as you drive into Strasbourg today from the German side, you'll cross the River Rhine. There's multiple bridges, so they're connecting well. Let's start out with that. And there's a commuter public train system, like a light rail system that you would typically find within cities as the public transport system. And that train crosses the river and the border multiple times a day. The train is called l'Européen, or the European, and it is quite common for people who hold different passport nationalities to cross that border as they please. It's one of the most European things you'll see going and driving through Europe. The city of Strasbourg is not only one of the seats of the European Parliament, it is also, I would argue, one of the poster child cities for European integration. Wouldn't you say so, Michael?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can have, it's a great place to live. I think it's one of the healthiest places, or people grow the oldest in that area in France. And I enjoyed specifically to have, fresh croissant in the morning and a German pretzel or bread in the evening. So I think taking the best from both cultures at one place, where can you do that?
And notice that he didn't talk about the wine and the beer, so I'm waiting for that to happen. But I guess that's the weaponizing of multiculturalism. You mentioned that. How did you turn that? And you said weapon, but I guess you mean making it into a tool that can help you win or succeed, right?
It's really two things. The first thing is really to understand or connect with a different culture. If you are from a different culture, if you've once left your bowl, if you had a chance to look from the outside in your bowl, you can empathize with people much better. And that's a big problem, I think, when it comes to innovation and when it comes to creativity. A lot of people who are outside your culture, a lot of people cannot talk to those people. And having had that experience multiple times made it easier for me to connect with people from a number of cultures, especially when it comes to marketing and communication, when you have to come up with new ideas, with naming concepts, or communicate on different levels. That was a very powerful tool, which is why I was using the word weapon.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And I want to acknowledge that our friend who's chilling on the beach in Naples apparently is familiar with that area. He lived in Colmar, which is also in the Alsace region. Thanks for sharing, Eric. So, Michael, you work in communication. That is a field that may be familiar to some of us or those of you watching, but it may also be quite a fuzzy field. What does that mean, communication? Did you communicate with people? Did you facilitate communication within the company? Did you represent the company outwardly? Was it both, or had it to do with selling? What is it you do?
I've done both. I've been around the office furniture industry for over 30 years or something like that, and I've started with product marketing. So marketing communication, coming up with names for chairs or campaigns or sales tools for an international audience. You target customers here, but then I moved to because I always believe that a brand is built from the inside out. I always had internal communication responsibility, and I explored the idea of the corporate communication section, and I really fell in love with that because it's built on reputation management and creating an aligning with all your audiences that are surrounding you, because those audiences are not living in silos anymore. They are connecting with each other. You have employees being shareholders, customers being your neighbors, and that's why I really enjoyed also being so multicultural, that you can really empathize with the different user groups that are surrounding an organization. So back to your question, that's corporate communication. Communicating with any audience is really something I'm very passionate about. And having the ability to empathize with some of those groups helped me a lot.
I have a quick question. Well, I have two questions. The first one is very important, of course, and you said you come from the Black Forest area of Germany. Is that where the cake is from? Can you do a really good Black Forest cake?
It's very hard to make with the ingredients that we have at hand here. Right. But I agree with you, it's one of my favorite cakes. Yeah.
Yes. Mine too. Yeah,
I love it.
The second question is probably a pretty big question, but when we've only just met, but when I was kind of looking at some of your work and thinking about innovation, as Christian said in the introduction, and we talk a lot about with our clients that maybe the experience of doing business cross-culturally gives you an internal, as you said, a superpower and something you can weaponize. But is it that you become innovative because of your cross-cultural experience, or is it that you are able to recognize the innovation that can come from different mindsets that exist in different cultures, or is it a combination of both?
It's really both. It's really both. Again, I think it's two things. The one thing is being able to connect with the different cultures out there to make sure you build a bridge into those. And the next kind of IQ is to immerse yourself in that culture, yeah, and then learn from that culture and bring it back into another culture. Yeah, that's, I think we all know the McDonald's example, you know, where how they are really successful in bringing their concept into a different market. Like there's no beef in an Indian burger, for example. We all know that, and you'll be surprised how great the ciabatta burger is, or the Croque Monsieur in McDonald's. You'll be surprised as an American. But when you companies that do that very well is a company like IKEA, I think, you know, because they understand living on a local level, and they bring some of those ideas into other areas, into other cultures. Yeah, and that is, I think that's a masterpiece, and that is hopefully the answer to your question. That this ability that you have not just to work with an international range of designers and experts, but that you're also able to bring ideas from one area into another one. I can give you an example of something that I've experienced personally when I had the project to create a communication concept for a canteen, a cafeteria of a company here in Grand Rapids. And the company wanted to be not just perceived more globally, but they wanted to make everybody feel welcome. In an American canteen, that's a hard thing to do, you would think. But, you know, if you think about how all those visitors think about food, yeah, and because they don't have cubicle lunches in mind. They don't, you know, locals at that time were taking their food back into the cubicle. But the idea was to, wait a minute, if we name this thing a little differently and we reflect more what global visitors would do here, then this would resonate with local people and would help international people to feel much more welcome. Little things like the name, it was called, they're not a canteen, it was called a work cafe with an accent. So that creates an expectation. But then you also have different offerings. You see the chef with a hat, not to play up the stereotype, but also there's an apron and things like that. And you see on a wall all the different, you know, habits that encourage you to pick first who you eat with before you pick what you eat. So, and you know, and I love language as a key into culture, but food is a very visible way to understand a culture or what's important to a culture. Just think about Italian cuisine. It's so basic, you know, but wonderful. And once you use those elements and traits, because you understand and lived in those cultures, or you know people who know that, and you can bring that to a place where inclusion, diversity, or global approach is welcome, then that rocks.
So yeah, this often happens when, so just a quick comment, it often happens when I'm working here in the US and we have people come from cultures that practice that, and they have this question about why do people a lot of times go back to their cubicle and not eat with everybody, and because this is the place where they actually, the water cooler talk, for want of a better word, is really the place where they learn a lot about the context of the business they're doing. So, sorry, Kristen. Sorry.
No. This is and I think Christina says it well. Globalization. I think that's the right thing, because, you know, globalization has a very negative image, unfortunately. I think because, you know, I mean, nobody wants to have global food. I mean, there could be nothing worse than global food. You don't want to eat the same thing. You don't want to blend. You want the different experiences, but they all, as a whole, are creating this local experience that you say, yeah, I have access to all those things, and I can immerse myself into them depending on what I'm looking for. Yeah. But just one last thing on the global part and how cultures sometimes clash. The team I was working with in Strasbourg, we had this deal over the lunch break. You know, I mean, we Germans always have business, and they said, you know, we're not going to talk business over lunch. If you want to sit with us at a table, we're not gonna talk business, and we're gonna speak French. That was so helpful.
So when you designed that global cafe or work cafe, not the canteen, not the cafeteria, what was there? How long did it take to come up with a decision on the design? How did the different viewpoints of the team inform the final design decision?
The name has been in my head and has been circulated for something else for quite some time, and I haven't invented a name. I've just put it to use from a different place there. But I've learned in a naming process, you never debate a name as such, because so many people have so many big different things based because of their cultural experiences in their head. It always starts with the story you would like to tell around the name. And if you want to tell a story about inclusion, about a place where you first pick who you want to eat with versus what you eat, then you agree, starting with the management team, agree on the story and what is important in that story, and then you see what name matches that best. That's a human-centric design approach when you help the audience to be part of that. The place where I work is we always put people first with what we create together. And that's to the process. That's really what we've done. We said, what story do you want to tell? You give them 3 different stories. And then as a team, you rally behind that. And then you have a platform to come up what name does it best. And when I suggested the word cafe name, it was like, we're doing that.
Okay. So your career, much of your career was in office furniture or in furniture that is used in, let's say, common spaces, whether it be work or adjacent to work activities. Would you say there are significant differences in how workspaces are designed and put together dependent on culture?
Absolutely. I actually had to produce a book about 15 years ago about how people work differently in Europe, in different cultures. It's fascinating. I always wondered, why can't you at the time why can't you get a great cappuccino or espresso in an Italian office? Because they didn't want to have that conversation with you in the office. They wanted to go and leave it. I mean, the world has changed a little bit. We don't have that much time, but still, certain cultures use different places for different things.
So you mean the German office would have, or the American office would have the fancy Lavazza or Jura espresso cappuccino machine in the cafeteria, so you could have access to it during the time you spend in the office. In the Italian office, they wouldn't do that. Say, what, I got a coffee bar down at the corner of the street. I want to go outside, smoke a cigarette, or maybe not, but have my coffee and be away from the office. 2 different expectations of behavior. Right?
Yeah, and you need to understand there are also regulatory elements here. A German office has, every employee has the right to see daylight. So that creates a whole different footprint. Like an office in the UK looks completely different than one in the US. So different regulations. Because of that, some places look differently. But I think the world is moving closer together when it comes to that. But still, certain cultures have certain rituals. Like, in a more autocratic culture, the corner office is still a thing. And some people still want to have a chair with a headrest to show they are the boss. And in some cultures that doesn't matter. You don't eat. But in some cultures, that's status. And when I say culture as a nation, that applies also to organizational cultures. Right. Because very often the dominant culture in an organization is the home culture. So that's why it's connected very often.
Yeah. Now, it's been, 13, 14 months since we've all been blessed with this new work world, pandemic-induced. How is it affecting the office furniture world? Is that making it a challenge? Is it just different? How's your experience been?
Well, I can't speak for the office furniture industry because I'm not working at the industry anymore, but I'm still connected, of course. I'm more interested in the human effect this has on people, because obviously it's harder to sell office furniture because, there was a little bit more difficult for some time. The offices weren't that used that much, and people thought it's not a great idea to have 7,000 people in one building for some time. So obviously that's changing. I think it's all coming back at some point. But what was interesting was the human reaction, that for some time it was people have seen out of a sudden that it's possible that you can work from home if you have enough space. Before the pandemic, only 10% of the US population was allowed to work from home. It was unpopular, or for some it was a privilege. Now that everybody had to do that, that has changed. Yeah. So and different cultures reacted differently. You know, I mean, I always said about the US culture, it's the only culture that thinks it's really cool to work at any time, at any place. And out of a sudden, you're not working from home, you're sleeping in your office. And that is very hard for some cultures, like in Indonesia or in where they really separate life and work. And so there it created a huge struggle. But on the other hand, I've seen, you know, the news in France that I always thought the French are separating work and life dramatically. But it turns out that working from home worked very well for some time. So it was very interesting to see that.
When you say humans, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, human-centered design, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it starts with putting the user in the center. You know, very often when you work on a certain tactic, when somebody says, I want a website, I want a certain product, this product gets catered to what the manufacturer wants. The difference here is that you understand the person using the product, and you put yourselves into the shoes and walk through that journey and design the product accordingly. That's the key difference. It's got a lot to do with empathy, that you put yourself, I mean, the way Brené Brown defines empathy is really the ability to take perspective, yeah, to really don't judge, yeah, really listen to the user. It depends, you know, you have to interview in a special way to make sure you're not kind of, you know, driving the answer. No judgment, but also recognizing the emotions in people. What are the emotional cues? It's not just what they say, it's how they think, how they feel, and how they behave. And that information, those insights, are so valuable to design something based on the needs of humans, of people.
So I'm going to ask a pointed, maybe controversial question. Would it even be possible to work in human-centered design without being able to empathize and without having the cultural intelligence to serve a diverse clientele? Could you do your job without your history?
Normally not, because, you know, I think marketing people are really good in it. They have that down. Unfortunately, mostly for one audience, for the customer only, but that's not a problem. I think it's really good that they can empathize with the different cultures because they really focus on it. They want to understand, is that product working in a specific culture in a certain market? Because, you know, even in the US, you know, that a designer in Atlanta, a space planner, picks a different color than a designer in Europe, in New York versus Chicago versus San Francisco. Yeah, you want to understand those nuances. So you need to have that. And my point about the multicultural mindset is, if you have practiced that or applied that in your daily life, if you've been outside a culture, if you learn the signals, if you get the ability to build those bridges, then you can do so much better job. And to your point, it should be mandatory.
It should be, yeah. You know, my brother works in the furniture design and design space business, and he's traveled a lot. He used to work for a company called 𝙏𝙬𝙤 𝘾𝙝ℎ, and he would go to Germany and different suppliers, and also here to the US and that kind of thing. And somebody from the outside might think, well, why would you, if you're designing furniture, why would you have to go and visit these places? But I think you know, I would love, out of this conversation, I want to kind of ask him that question, you know, what those experiences of just physically traveling to a different place and sitting with the people from different perspectives and different designers has had on his work, because he's wonderfully successful at it. And and I couldn't tell color from one thing to the other, but he's great at it. But it's I think you know, doing what you're saying is very important in any kind of field of endeavor. If you can kind of outside of your comfort zone and your perspective, to see the world through a different set of eyes is what we obviously teach and, you know, promote most of the time, right?
And it's not just the end user, Brett. To your example in the furniture industry, while every furniture dealer channel has similar needs when it comes to products, certain cultures look at the product in a different way. I mean, in the furniture industry, there's no tougher dealer than the German dealer who is looking first under the desk than at the desk to see how robust is the piece. So, and you want to understand that if you think you can sell in Germany from the US, or if you think a German manufacturer can easily sell in the US, you have to travel there. You have to go there. You have to talk to people. To Christina's point, you have to go to the bar. I've learned that with certain cultures, decisions are not made in the office. You go out and dine, and like what I've learned very often in Latin-driven communities, the decision is made in the evening after dessert, and if you miss those 15 minutes, you miss the travel. The trip was not a success.
Yeah.
Totally agree. When did you know for yourself that your multicultural work experience made you better at what you do now? Was there ever a point where you recognized, oh, I'm good at this, or I'm getting better at my work because I spent these 3 years in France and Strasbourg, or because now I'm raising a third culture child in the upper Midwest? Was there ever a conscious point where you recognized, oh, this is actually helping me professionally?
There was a shock moment during the onboarding of the expatriation. And my culture coach at the time still remembers that when he's listening, because we had to assess ourselves, how we're doing from a culture perspective. The high, low context piece, and map it out, how we're doing against certain cultures, really to get more sensitive to that. And I was shocked because I looked at the parameters of my home culture, the German culture, and the location where I was supposed to live. And I was shocked because it was exactly in the middle. And I was thinking, I've lost my identity. Oh my goodness. I'm not here and I'm not there. I'm in between. And then the coach took me aside and said, Michael, this is a gift. You can build bridges. Use it for good. And that's the moment when I realized being in between is actually helping, because you can build bridges for people. And that's really what I think is the core of my personal brand, is to build bridges by bringing perspective. And I think I can do that well, because I can read the signals out there, and I can bring people together, which really works with human-centered design.
Now, A, that is beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. And B, I'm only projecting this because this is what happened to me. I'm not sure if you had a similar moment. When you recognize that your behaviors have shifted over time because you lived outside of your native culture for a certain period, and then you bounce back into your native culture and you're confronted with the behavioral preferences of home, and maybe you're confronted with your past self a little bit, and you recognize that today you're like this, as you said, in the middle, and now you're going back to this where you have been in the past. Was there ever a moment where you judged your old self or your compatriots for not having developed a behavioral flexibility?
Yeah, again, this is the challenge in not judging on this empathy journey. Yes, I would compare to the 7 phases of mourning. You're leaving your culture. You're really happy to see something new. You're starting to miss it. You get angry to the place where you are because something is not working. You get angry to where you're coming from because, why are you guys not getting that? Because you've seen something new that's really working. And then why are the Germans not getting that? This is working here so much. And then you see something in the country where you are, and in your home country, it's really working well. So I think you're going through phases. And you have to relax again, because it's like the heaven and hell thing. In general, you're learning more. It is richer. And that's what I come back to.
Yeah, that sense of mourning is something that's really confronting when I bring that up with clients. When you tell them that, you can actually experience the very same feelings as you do when you physically lose another person. And they kind of look at you quizzically because they can't understand and connect the two. And what I say to them is that and what we all say, I guess, is that you are actually losing your own identity. Is this process subconsciously of losing who you were And that becomes an experience that is quite confronting, although, you know, on the other side of it is quite freeing. But there is this sense of, well, I'm kind of losing an identity that I used to look at the mirror and be so confident in knowing and understanding and being accustomed to, that it's so different.
Well, I'm an optimist, and so I think I just worry a lot.
How do you do that? An optimist that worries a lot. That's a bit of a...
I stole that quote. It's Madeleine Albright. She said that. No, I mean, you get a new identity, because the only constant in life is change. You're learning new experiences every day, and they define you. The closest to a category where I would get today is, I would say I'm a global citizen. But I think being global is not a negative thing. You know, being a German with a green card and a German passport gives me the opportunity to work tomorrow in 180 countries. Yeah, and we're not sure if we want to stay here forever. Yeah, if I can pick the place where I will die, it's not going to be here. It's at a different place, because I want to see different things at some point, as much as we like to be around. But you know what? Again, once you left your home place and you have a good experience, it is you want, if you do this, you want at least it in an international or in a diverse capacity.
Well, here's one thing that you may or may not know about Michael, but his son plays soccer, or as we say, football, and apparently he's doing well. So if you ever follow Michael on social media, you will see a lot of posts about his son playing soccer. Maybe as soon as your son gets a contract with one of the European teams, you might be forced to move anyway. I don't know.
You know, we've been very clear with him. If you want to play soccer, I want to take it serious, pick a place in Europe, and we go there. But it's interesting, because he is born in France. He is for more than 10 years in the US, and he has a German passport. I said, buddy, which team would you pick?
Yeah,
I'm not commenting on that publicly.
Yeah. And I think the three of us are in the same situation. We all three of us raise children with a third culture identity, and I think that also as parents of third culture kids, that adds to this multicultural angle, or that adds another angle to our multicultural identity, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's back to your question, Brett. You know, I mean, do you regret things, or you know, when it comes to the ups and downs? When I realized that the default language of my son is not my father's language, that was a very shaking moment. You know, when I was holding my son in a pool, I think it was in the beach in the ocean, and he was, don't let me go, don't let me go. And he said that from the bottom of his heart in English. I was kind of thought, okay, yep, I guess the default culture is English. So do I regret that? No. Yeah, because we are raising him with an open mind, traveling as much as we can at the moment, mostly to soccer spots, but hopefully again, you know, internationally again. So to see the family and to see new things. Because at some day, as a third culture kid, he's gonna pick a place where he wants to live. Likely not where we are. It's different, and
how does Mum feel about that? You know, this is a discussion we have in our household. It's like, well, Emily's got three citizenships, and yeah, she can go to school in any country. Now, are we going to follow her? Or does she want us to? I mean, there's some early conversations. Great conversation.
That's where multicultural mindset is not helpful, because you know, if his both grandmothers are watching now, they'd say, "Well, you took away our only grandchild."
Yeah, that's the challenge sometimes. You said something in the beginning that I want to conclude with here today, because it may throw another point of view into the conversation on being a guest, so to say, or being an outsider that has become an insider here in the US. And this is what the three of us have in common. None of us three were born here, but we choose to live here in the United States. You said that, kind of tongue-in-cheek, whether Grand Rapids, Michigan, or that part of Michigan could be used as an example of what U.S. culture is like. I've been to that part of Michigan. I don't know it intimately well. So when you talk that way about Western Michigan or Southwestern Michigan, what do you mean by that? Well, or for those of our viewers who are not familiar with the regionality of U.S. culture, how is Michigan or how is Grand Rapids representative of the U.S. or how is it not?
Well, as an optimist, I would say if you look at the book, The 11 Nations of the United States, there are certain places that are good or bad in certain things. And I think that's the reality for every location. Like when you live in Bavaria and you realize Germany is not like Bavaria. Not everything in Germany is like Bavaria. And when I came to Grand Rapids, fortunately I knew the culture and everything with the Midwest culture. I knew that it is not New York. Yeah. And my role, I was brought to the US, to Grand Rapids intentionally to bring a multicultural, a global mindset. Yeah, and doing projects like what I've explained. Yeah. And that's when I've learned that, being different is hard. It's hard work because, you're here for change and not everybody likes change. Yeah. And so I've learned to look for the people that are open for change and work with those people. But there are certain places where it's just hard to drive change, and the Midwest is known for being very community driven, yeah. But it's also about how can I explain that? It's an element of passive aggressiveness you sometimes feel, yeah, or that when you it's not directly what you see is what you get all the time. They don't mean it in a negative way, but it's there's this confrontation avoidance. And that's something, for a German who is honest that it hurts sometimes, we Germans are sometimes, because we think if something's not working, we have to talk about it. And that's something that's not always working very well in certain areas. And that I had to adjust. I'm not the bull in the China store because I know how to behave and how to do that, but that was an adjustment.
Michigan nice, as they call it, or Midwest nice, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's the story about the New York people, New York restaurant owners who love to hire Midwest people as waiters, as waiting staff, because it's so hard to explain in New York to be nice or friendly. So I think that's the great thing about this place here. It's a great place to raise kids. It's wonderful. Yeah.
But as a direct, low context communicator, you sometimes miss the straightforwardness of your communicative preference. You had to adjust to that.
Look, Christian, to close on that, I mean, with a multicultural mindset, you learn when you go in a meeting in Germany and nobody says something, you have consensus. In the French culture, sometimes, if it's not driven by the manager, if you bring a new idea, you have to prove that you're right. And in a Midwest meeting, silence is the worst thing. So you really have to follow up and want to make sure, okay, you said it's great, but is it really good? Yeah. Or you said nothing, and can we talk about this again from a different angle? And that's what I had to learn. But it's working. You have that mindset, you can survive those situations.
I think the bottom line is here. You said I had to learn, and you chose to learn, and you chose to adjust from what you learned. I think that's what we tell our clients all the time. We're humans. We are different than any other living being on this planet. We are given choice. We have choice of decision making. I had a training before we came on here, and one of our training participants said, "Well, you said earlier that we need to do this." I said, "No, that's not what I said. The word need comes from a place of scarcity. I'm not going to tell you what to do, and you don't need to do anything. I'm only making you aware of choices that you may have not seen yourself earlier, and I'm presenting you with these choices for you to decide, do you want this or do you want that? And the choice and the outcome of your choice will define the next step. But as a trainer and coach, I will never tell you there's a need for doing anything. We have the choice. And if you choose to learn from your experience, and if you choose to implement those learnings, then that's how you develop that multicultural mindset, right?
Absolutely. So with that mindset, it's much easier to learn, to understand the different culture, and it makes your life better. I really believe that.
Absolutely.
Michael, thank you for joining us today. This was lovely. We've been working on this to get you on here. This is great. I hope Michigan will continue to treat you well. I hope the spring is around the corner, because I know he's got a four-wheel animal in his garage that has a lot of horsepower under the hood that is yearning to be taken outside. So I'm going to leave it at that. Michael, thanks for joining us. Two Chaps, Many Cultures, Thursday Q edition 154. We're out for today. Join us back tomorrow with another guest, and well, you'll hear about it. Just be there tomorrow. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Michael. Good to meet you, sir.
Thank you.